Okay, for the algebra skills, for all of these, but especially 1 through 6, these are written in vertex form. And so we're just trying to identify the vertex on number 1 through 6. For example, I should be able to look at number 1 and say that the vertex is 1, -4. Now, before I go through the rest of those, I would actually want to go to a different screen and show you how I know that as a reminder. Because when we did circles, we talked about how the x minus 1 quantity squared, parentheses squared, that meant that your graph was shifted 1 to the right. And so we had x's and y's both in parentheses, both squared, and so we always did the opposite of what they were. So I do want to show you that with the graph though. So for example, this is the graph y equals x minus 3 squared plus 1. You can see that the graph has shifted 3 to the right and plus 1. If I want that graph to go back to 0, I just change it to x minus 3 squared. If I wanted to move down 5, I put a minus 5 at the end, back to 0. If I wanted to go up 2, I put a plus 2. So the number at the end clearly moves it up and down, and it follows the sign exactly. The x minus 3 made it go 3 to the right. If I change that to an x minus 5, it'll go 5 to the right. If I get rid of it completely, it goes back to 0. If I make it an x plus 1, it goes 1 to the left. If I make it an x plus 3, it went 3 to the left. X plus 5 is 5 to the left. And back to 0. So a lot of students have questions about why does the x value go to the right when it says minus and left when it says plus? Why is that the opposite? And why is it the opposite when the y value is not the opposite? For example, it says minus 3, so we went 3 to the right, and then it says plus 2, so we went up 2. So why is this one the opposite of what it looks like, but this one not the opposite? It's just the same. So I do want to take a moment in this video just to talk about why that is. And I can actually show you that by showing you where this equation came from. This equation, x minus 3 parentheses squared plus 2, actually started as a different equation. Y minus 2 equals parentheses x minus 3, close my parentheses, and then square it. Now notice what happened is the red graph became the blue graph. In other words, both of those equations are still being graphed. I can turn one off. Okay, there's the red graph. I'm going to turn the blue graph back on. It's just covering the red graph. In other words, these are the exact same equation. And here's what I want you to see. They both started as the opposite. This minus 2 is still up 2 on the graph. We went up 2. And this minus 3 means we went to the right 3. So they both started as an opposite. The y value is opposite. Instead of minus 2, we're actually going up 2. And the x value is opposite. Instead of left or negative 3, we're actually going to the right 3. But it's easier for a lot of students to see the equation in a different way. So what they did was they took this equation, which is the exact same thing, and they simply added 2 to both sides of the equation so that when we type it in, we just have y equals x minus 3 squared plus 2. And so the 2 became the odd one, actually. We see it as just normal. It says plus 2, so we go up 2. But the reason that it's not the same as what we do with the x is because it was moved around in the equation. Originally, both the x and the y values performed the opposite direction. But then we rearranged the equation, so now the y value performs the direction that it kind of looks like, and the x value, since it was never moved, the x value performs the opposite direction, which was the original intent. So you can go back through and look at that again if you want, but that means for our x and y values, the x value is going to be the opposite and the y value is going to be the same. So for number 2, my vertex is going to be 4 to the right and down 1. X minus 4 is 4 to the right, minus 1 is down 1. For number 3, x minus 3 is 3 to the right, and plus 2 at the end is 2 up. So my vertex is at 3, 2. For number 4, x minus 4 is 4 to the right, and down 3 at the end, minus 3. For number 5, x minus 3 is 3 to the right, and there is no number at the end. When there's no number at the end, that graph stays at 0, so there's no vertical shift. And number 6, it's just an x squared. It's not a parentheses squared. So that's the same as x minus 0 squared. In other words, it's not going left or right, it's just staying at 0. So 0 is the x-coordinate of my vertex, and then the plus 6 at the end means that the graph went up 6. So that's the first 6 problems.